because it's an exam prep that I want to go to in my area. I'm in Virginia, so I wanted to know if you went back and marked any of your answers and or changed any of your answers, because I had a tendency of doing that, and I
Yeah.
failed by two. But it's like, did that help change the answers or did it not? So the last time I took it, I didn't change anything. I took breaks, I didn't change any answers, and I failed by I think like nine. So I was like, maybe I should have went back and changed the answers. So I think that's something that I'm going to struggle with the next time, like each time I take the test.
So I didn't. I know, and I'm sure Pam, you can allude to this more, but like I was always taught never change an answer. Like
Correct.
I skipped, and that's a different story. Like I'll read the question and be like, you know what, man, this is not coming to me right away, so I'm just going to skip it. And I probably skipped about 20 questions. So once I got to that 170, I wrote down. I made sure like when they give you that pad, I wrote down like the question number of the one I skipped. You know what I mean, just to make sure. But there's actually in the settings you can go and like you can ask the test person that works there. You can actually go in and it will show you like which ones you didn't answer. Um, but but basically, I skipped like 20 questions. But I as a rule, I don't think you should ever like change answers. Because usually it's like the first one. When it hits you the first, it's usually the right.
That is correct. Don't change. Leave it blank. Don't spend too much time on it, because hopefully something else in another question will remind you of what that answer might be. And sometimes you don't know why you know, but don't change.
Yeah, I think I did that. I did actually went back and changed answers one of the times. I swear to God, if I didn't do that, I probably would have passed. But I would have never met you, Pam.
I was
So
going to say, see? Not to forget all the money you would have saved, but
yeah,
hey. um, one of the things I also told Matt was to stop buying study material. You know what? You shouldn't find any study material any different. The information should be the same. No, you may find one that it's easier for you to understand. And like a lot of my students, Matt's not a huge reader, not his fan, not his favorite thing to do. So the videos work for him, and always go back and you can watch these videos. I've got plenty online, and even there's some really good podcasts out there. So I'm a huge fan of Phil with Fill in the Gaps. I'm not a fan of the acronyms, but he's got great videos out there. So if you're not someone who reads, then it's really okay to go ahead and listen. Or I always say, if you're going to read it, you can also record it, and then as you're talking, and then go back and just listen to it. So it's your information. You can read it. One of my students is actually out there in the group. One of my students said he was reading the APGAR book out loud. And I'm like, if he would share that, that'd be great.
yeah, right.
I do it
Yeah.
online, but I think she'd fire me and like sue me.
I mean, it's for me. It was kind of like a self discovery process too. Like I never, realized that I'm more of like an audio learner.
Hmm.
I think we all learn differently.
We do.
And I realized about myself that I'm more of an audio learner because I need to do like 10 things at once, so I can like listen to it, do laundry, cook, whatever, clean or work or go to the gym. Like that's kind of like how I am. I can't. It's hard for me to like sit down and just read. You know what I mean? So I like to do like two or three things at once. That's just how I am. So I would listen to Pam's videos. That was so helpful.
I think I
Yeah.
have another question. Sorry. Outside of the tutoring with Pam, how often did you study? And did you study like new material or different material that you didn't study previously?
Nah, it's same. Like I think Pam hit it on the head. Like it's really the same stuff. I mean, the stuff with APGAR. It's really I just but it's the thing is you take the test. Like for me, like I took the test and I failed, and then you have to wait 3 months to even take it again. You know what I mean? And like I'm like probably the biggest procrastinator in the world. So I'll wait till like 1 month till I have to take the test and start reading again. But I forget a lot of the stuff. So now I'm like refreshing, you know. But
And I tutor pretty much the same way for everybody. The goal is that we'll break it off into pieces. So, we get the assessment in the beginning, and then I'll kind of tell you, you decide, or your weakest area where we're going to start. And the goal is to conquer that area. And then we'll add another area while still testing on the other areas. So I'll give you a reading assignment, or a study assignment. I don't care how you get the information in, just get it in, and then go from there. But the goal is just to build and build and build. And I think just not skipping around. There's so much information. So if you can just kind of master each area at a time, and then at the same time, going back and doing tests, so that way you're not lost in that system of retaining it.
Pam, I don't know if you have any suggestions for this, but like a lot of my issue was like just the mental exhaustion. I mean, that's a long ass test. You know what I mean? So basically, even if you get up and you go, like I went to the bathroom twice. I mean, it's still like it took me twice or 3 times to just get over the mental exhaustion part of it. I don't know if you have any suggestions, but that was hard.
And I usually take that practice test before. So at least if this is your first time taking it, just take that practice test to get used to sitting there for that long. And I told someone today, for me, and I took my test like 35 years ago. I remember I wanted to be very mindful that this was, I'd worked everything I'd up at this point was for this. This was my goal, and I wanted to enjoy the moment. So I think, especially with my ones who have anxiety, just mindfulness that you are here. You are here to do this. You can do this. You have this information. You know this. So as opposed to seeing it as this like awful hurdle to get through, just enjoy the moment. I know that sounds easy, but just mindfulness. Enjoy the moment. Ask him other questions, guys.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
What I just wanted to suggest, I'm an audio learner, but also visual. So what I did was, I have a daughter. She's 21 now. So for the stages of development, I drew pictures of her through each stage and used that and the audio to help me remember the stages of development.
Very good.
That helped. I'm not much of a drawer with stick figures.
It worked though, didn't it?
Yes.
My goal is for each of you to hear my voice during the test. You're so tired of hearing my voice. Like, hear my voice. Just hear my voice. If I could be a little in your pocket, I would, but just hear my voice. Somebody else had a question.
I guess I'm on the right track now because I hear it when I'm reading and remembering stuff. And for me, when I'm working with you, I love the way that you break it down for me, because I'm like, okay, and that's when we had our last session, when I said, okay, can you explain it to me like this? And then that helps me to remember it.
I'm glad. And the, you know me, I use a lot of Google. Let's look at some pictures. Like you said before, pictures, I think, from a lot of my auditory, the visual people, you can remember what that picture looks like. That just makes it so much easier. Yeah. And I try to teach it the way that you understand it. So everybody's different, and that's the goal, is so that you understand it. That's all that matters. And whether you're wrong or right in the practice test, I'll ask you why. Because I want you just to memorize it. I want you to know it. Because if the question is written a different way and you've only memorized this way, you don't know the stuff. Matt, code of ethics?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, you'll have a few that's like, all right, verbatim, but like more so it's like, again, like, what are you going to do in this situation? I mean, there was like I had a subpoena question, I had a, dual relationship, yeah, I think a lot of it too, it's, and like, so I wish I could get my hands on the test. You know what I mean? Like, I wish
Everybody does.
You know what I mean? Like, but
which ones you exactly missed? It would be really nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you know what I mean? But so, I think that a lot of it is like using like strengths based. I mean, if it comes down to like you not knowing, like, or it comes down to that one or two, it's like, I don't know if it's this one or that one. I think what I did too was like, you know what, which one is it where it's like strengths based and like, and which one is it like where you're trying to empower the client and like the client and self-determination. Like those things are so important, man. Like that self-determination, because there's a lot of, it tricks you up, so like when you get down to those like one or two that you're like, man, this is close, like kind of like ask yourself, is this using self-determination, is this empowerment, is this strength perspective?
Matt, I have a question. Matt,
Yeah,
what question other from the ASWB? Think you did the practice ASWB exam?
I did so many exams, but I think the ones with what Pam uses on her videos.
Social work,
Social work
educational
exam
service.
services. Yeah, those are the ones that I love. So yes.
Yeah, they're those questions, man. I tell you what, man. I think some of those questions are harder than the actual exam, the actual real exam.
And they're supposed to be, and hopefully longer too, because I want you to get used to answering those long questions with all that vignette crap. I want you to get used to that, so when you see it in there, that it doesn't freak you out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah.
Anything else, guys? Go ahead.
It's a long journey, so I'll give back. I mean, man, like literally six times. Like that's, I didn't think I ever was going to pass this test. I thought I thought I met my match. I really did. But
when the first time we met, I told you, I said, if you listen to me, just listen to me and do what I say, you'll pass.
Were there any medication questions?
Yeah, few, but not, just know your SSRIs. You know what I mean? Know your SSRIs, and
that's your Prozac, your Zoloft, Paxil, any of those antidepressants. So serotonin drinks.
Yeah, and your anxiety ones, and then like the ones for schizophrenia and bipolar. You know what I mean? Like
that'd be like a Mellaril, a Thorazine, a Haldol for your antipsychotics, and then for bipolar, it's lithium. And one of the issues with lithium is sometimes it causes lithium poisoning, so that you have to have a blood work done with your lithium.
For the medications, has anyone seen any generics on their tests? I haven't yet.
They'll have it like in parentheses. They'll be like, they'll have like, the medication at the name brand, and then they may have like the generic in the parentheses, but
okay.
They won't do that to you. They're not that mean. They're mean. They're not that mean.
But once you understood how to answer, did you really find it as tricky as you thought it was?
I mean, no. I mean, like obviously, because I got a 115 and I only needed a 99, I got 115. So like that test punched me in the mouth every time I took it, and I punched it back. You know what I mean?
I'm so proud of you.
I gave it like a Mike Tyson uppercut. You know what I mean?
But they're not trying to trick you. They're not. I mean, it seems like it on the test, but they're not. They're just trying to see if you know critical thinking skills. And in this situation, exactly at this moment, giving these parameters, what would you do? And don't read any more into the question that's there. Don't assume. And sometimes you'll see questions that they were kind of similar to ones you've seen before. So you think you know the answer, but don't you go back and read it again. Read it again.
Yeah, I think the best thing is like you just narrow it down to those two. There's going to be two that for the most part you're going to be like, no way. Just look for like what's not the answer. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of instead of going in saying what's the answer, say all right, what's not the answer. Like that's really. For me, that was the key.
Got it. And then go back to the last two, go back to the question and look in the question to prove it. And if it's a word that you don't know or a term you don't know, match terms. If you see planning in the question and you have no idea, look at planning in the answer and then look at the words around it. So I've taught this test to people who are not not native English speakers, so that many of the vocabulary words they just didn't know. So really, it's kind of looking to match those words if you have no idea. Okay. Matt will be taking his LCSW.
Yeah, I'll be utilizing your services again soon.
Oh, if you just keep what you're doing, you won't need me. The difference with LCSW is just many more the clinical exams, knowing the time frames for the medication. I'm sorry, the diagnosis, knowing 6 months, knowing the symptoms. So that's really the only difference. There's still just as many community questions. The main difference is that those DSM. Matt, what about the supervision? Go ahead.
Me?
Whoever said you were saying something, I think.
Yeah, I was wondering, because I'm in Michigan, and all of us, we don't technically have LCSW, but we have the clinical and the macro. Why would someone take the LMSW and the LCSW? Why wouldn't they just take the LCSW?
Oh, it depends on what states you live in. So,
Okay.
for example, I'm from Florida. In Florida, you don't have to have an LMSW. I've never had one. I went straight through and I got an LCSW. So that's every state is different. The guidelines for passing every state are different, what the score is. So that's what makes it so difficult. I'm from South Florida. In Florida, the minimum score is like 103 to pass. However, that Florida license, most states offer reciprocity because California, Florida, and New York have those higher passing rates.
Okay, you scared me
there. Yeah, so it depends on the and so my Florida people in California, it's a lot harder because each state gets to set that score, and each state gets to decide what an LMSW is, what the requirements are. So it just depends on your state.
Okay, thank you.
Trust me, I wouldn't be taking a test if I didn't have to take it. I'll tell you right now.
Matt, I tuned in a little late, but how long were you studying this final time? Like your exam and passed it?
I would say the last month, like literally every day, every day, I immersed myself in the videos, the questions. You know what I mean? That's basically, I literally just immersed myself.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Because you don't want to like leave the test failing and be like, damn, man, I wish I would have studied more. You know what I mean? Like, that's the worst feeling. You want to at least go in and be like, I studied my ass off. You know what I mean? And you don't want to go in because that, if it's your first time taking it, don't underestimate this test, man. It's something else,
It is not easy, but it is very much doable.
Yeah, definitely doable. Like, there's no way you can just get by. You know what I mean? You have to. There's a lot of things you need to know. There's no way you can just, I mean, maybe, I don't know, but
No, there's not. I mean, there's not. And part of the problem is a lot of my students are really smart. You did well in school. So you think, oh, school was easy, so I can just wing this test. And that
Right.
doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
Not at all.
Other questions? Okay. Anything else you want to share, Matt?
No, I think that's it. Unless anyone else has anything.
We're going to talk about racial diversity. If you want to stick around, I don't mind. I'm sure you have nothing else better to do.
Yeah, I mean, when the the wife comes in, I'm gonna have to try exit, but for now I can
Okay. So in general, thank you. And guys, you all get this same turn when you pass, so you'll be asked to come back and share your information. And one of the things that I think makes me a really big tutor is people like Matt. Because if you share with me, pay it forward, then we're really kind of keeping up. And if you'll notice, like some of the other programs, and again, I'll never badmouth anybody, but some of the other programs don't have any information on community development because that's a rather new trend. So, the fact is that, so if you've got a book or you printed the material, you're not going to reprint necessarily because there's a new trend coming out. So if I'm on the front line and I know what's going on, then I can gear your study guide that way. Also, I teach college. So we kind of know what we teach. So we know what's coming up. I can tell you what it looks like in the future. Okay. Okie dokie. Ask me questions, guys. I'm going to mute you. Somebody, I think it's Matt. I'll mute you. Okay. Feel free to talk. I have muted you just because to keep the background noise down, but please feel free to answer and ask questions. In the chat box earlier, I did put a document on racial identity. We're going to talk today about the importance of cultural and racial identity and some of those things. So one of the things, I'm going to switch over. I'm going to switch my screen over here, guys, and put you here. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. So the racial identity model, it is in the APGAR book. And again, my concern sometimes with her book is she just doesn't, you don't know what's important and what's not. So sometimes it's hard to figure out like what things I should study and what things I shouldn't. But the racial identity model looks at how we all develop, no matter what your race is. I'm going to share my screen. What we'll do, like we always do, is we will go over I'll give you some terms, and then we'll go and do some questions. Okay, and it has been recorded. So then, this is the racial identity model. For the record, we do not have any tests that are bias-free. So when you look at the questions, when you're reading the questions, those are based on being middle-class majority. So which just means in this country, it's white America. So that's where the questions come from. So know if you come from a different background, then you might view those questions from where you come from, and we don't want to do that. For the test, we really want to kind of look at the view of a majority class. See my screen? Yes? Yes, we can. Type in your chat. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So in general, this talks about the racial identity model, and I did send it to you. So I've seen a couple of these questions on there. So and I'll be very honest with you, I'm quite familiar with the black one. I'm not as familiar with the white one, just because I teach the black one, and that's easy for me to identify with. But you want a kind of an idea of what all of these are. In the Black cultural identity model, what happens is for my children, I can tell you what it's like. My children, we live in a predominantly white, upper middle class neighborhood. So when they were 3, 4, or 5, they didn't realize they were any different than their friends. Okay, they played together, they spoke the same language. The families were friends. They really didn't get it. So that's kind of pre-encounter. Then encounter happens, when they're about, my kids at least 12, 13, they realize they're just not like everybody else or the majority of their friends. That this is the reality that they're not truly white. There are things that their friends can do that they can get away with. Their hairstyles the students can get away with that my students couldn't get away with, my children. So that's the encounter. Immersion or immersion. At this point, you really seek out to avoid symbols of whiteness. They are learning to really develop who they are from your own racial background. So for my children, issues such as driving while black, my kids like, Mom, that's not true. That's not true. They would get pulled over for things that maybe their friends that didn't look like them would get pulled over for. It was a big deal to hang out at Walmart after the football games at 12:01 a.m. And my son would say, Mom, why'd they pick on me? So to explain to him, to have him understand that when you live in the majority culture, that it's seen differently. So he had to learn to still live in the very white world and yet still learn to be who he is. So that's that next step is internalization, that you really then are very proud of your heritage. much like a pro-Black attitude, like, wow, beginning to, for my daughter now, she's 22, and this is a process for her. She's, wearing a hairstyle that is much more natural for African Americans, and being proud of who she is. And it's a process when you're most time when you're the minority in a majority culture. And then internalizing commitment, that really looks like then not only being proud of your difference, but then really making that commitment to be who I am and still live in this majority world that doesn't look like you. So you'll see there's a biracial and a white, and for white people. And again, I did put both of that in your chat box right there. Just some terms to be really familiar with. Assimilation. So the difference between assimilation and acculturation. Assimilation is look as similar as. Acculturation is to keep my own culture. So, for example, a question might say, there is a Japanese boy family who moves here. The Japanese boy begins to wear Western clothes. He's wearing jeans and looking very much like his American friends. And at home, he begins to backtalk his mother. What is he in? So he is in. Oh, sorry. He is in the assimilation process, because now he's beginning to look and act as similar as every other child in his classroom. So, because by tradition, someone of Asian descent would not talk to their parents that way. And that is an issue of hierarchy, and you wouldn't do that. Okay, so he's beginning to assimilate. So what happens at home is the same thing that happens at school, that he really begins to look and act like his friends. Okay. Separation, marginalization, integration. When you think of marginalization, think of that bell curve. The bell curve, there's one side, there's two sides that are very, very small. After the 99.75, the little bit that's left, that is the marginalization. So that is really kind of losing contact with both cultures, your own culture as well as your identity or your natural culture. There's a very small group of people that fit in that marginalized, where you don't really relate to any culture. Okay. And then integration, of course, is valuing and accepting your own culture as well as the majority culture. So those are just some terms that you need to know. I've seen those on the test a couple times. This is our racial identity model, and it really may say, according to the racial identity model, what happens. I do suggest that you read all of them, not just, they're nice, they're interesting to read in general, and see how they relate to you, but you'll see some of those terms on the test. Okay. It's based on Erickson, by the way. So when I talk about our Asian populations, one of the things that we are aware of with many our Asian as well as Hispanic populations is they are a collectivistic society. Anybody want to volunteer and tell me what that means? So any of you that get your nails done, I'm pretty sure it's the way in most areas, is when you go to the nail salon.
They believe in working.
Go ahead.
They believe in working together as a family to achieve the greater goal. Like,
you got it. So what does it look like? You're right. Give me more.
How
many of your family members live in your house?
Just me, myself and my girls.
Sure,
but when I was in Jamaica, where it was my grandmother, my aunt, my mom, kids, my cousin. So it was like 15 of us in the house at one point.
And that is not necessarily based on economics. So for a collectivistic society, we do what's best for the whole family, not just what's best for me. So for many Americans, that's hard for us to understand. Our family can come over and, they can be here for a few days, but they can't be staying for, moving in and stuff. We ain't letting that happen. But other societies really don't feel that way. So you'll see many times our Hispanic families, especially our Mexican families, where you have, lots of people that live in the home, and, grandma and uncle and aunt and everybody lives there. Our Asian families, the same kind of thing, especially like I was using the nail salon for an example. So at the nail salon, many times they're cousins, they're people, they're all related. And it's not because they have to, it's because that's what you believe in. That's what's good for one, it's good for the entire family. So that term is collectivistic. If you remember the Virginia Tech shooting, he was an Asian descent, and he was failing class. And that's what he did. She was the one who shot at Virginia Tech. I forgot now, it's a long time ago. But what we don't understand as Americans is that was not just a disgrace to him, his entire family. So that's a concept that we need to, just for the test and in general, to understand that it really is about the entire family. If I look bad, I make a bad impression on my entire family. Now, if one of our cousins goes to prison or, has a baby out of wedlock, well, yeah, we're a little embarrassed, but it's not the same. The same as, like, this is a total embarrassment to our entire family. Education is extremely important to many of our Asians. And when I say Asian, that means our Chinese, Japanese, Korean, all of that kind of on the continent of Asia. And of course, these are always for the test. We don't ever assume that everyone is that way. The assumption is just to kind of understand some things when it comes to the test. So our African Americans, our Asians, our Hispanics really are less likely to come to therapy in general and less likely to share. So you might see a question about someone of African American descent and deciding whether or not it's resistance or a cultural issue. So be sure that you read the question to know whether it's truly resistance. They're not saying anything. They are late for appointments, things like that, or if they're just silent. Because silent is not often resistance. Silent sometimes is just my lack of me being uncomfortable. The test talks about in my Hispanic families, it's very important for the person to get to know the therapist before they share. So they may ask more questions before I'm actually going to share anything about me. So they'll ask the client questions. The social worker questions. There's a question about the Hispanic family and the little boys being discharged. And the term is my best Spanish. Familiarism, FAM. Okay, and that term is just that the family is everything. So if the entire family comes and the entire family is in the room, when it comes to discharge planning, the entire family will be there for the discharge planning. Okay, and if that means I'll have to sign a consent, they will. But to suggest that mom or grandma and the other people leave the room while you speak to mom and dad, that's not appropriate, because definitely that is not what they believe to be family. You'll see the word machismo sometimes, and sometimes people have seen machismo as a definition of just that he's so tough and he's so mean. For many of our Hispanic people, it means that he's the provider. The father is responsible for this family. So you'll get a lot of questions, or see a lot of questions, the girl wants to do something, blah, 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 but her dad says no, or we have to ask her dad first, because he's truly the head of the house. And that is what the belief system is. And, he just talked about self-determination. We work inside our family's belief systems. Okay. Nothing wrong with them, just different than how we normally see as Americans. Our goal, of course, is to have a worldview, but there is no way that you're ever going to know everything about every population. Just not going to happen. Just not going to happen. So it's to understand as much. And often on the test, you'll see the question of, what do you do first? What do you do first is you understand your own stuff. Okay, we all bring biases into the therapy, into our life. Okay, so it's not as if I can pretend that I'm not biased. However, I can keep my biases in check. Okay, I prefer, this person to that person. I prefer this, I prefer that. Those are just my biases. And pretend we don't is not okay. We don't want the world to be that lovely melting pot as we once believed. We want it to be a salad bowl. We want the lettuce to be green and crunchy and our tomatoes to be sweet and those red onions, and all that together makes a really good salad. So we really wanted to respect diversity and really honor, what families do. The goal is, of course, to be cultural competent, and that is, first going to accept and aware of differences. My own cultural values. Know that, you'll see the term ethnicity, ethnocentrism. We think every ethnicity, we think that the way we do it is right. So we think America is the best country ever, and we are very ethnocentric. So in order to be culturally competent, I need to come away from that viewpoint and say, yes, I live in America, and yes, I think America is great. However, if someone doesn't think America is great, it doesn't mean that. It just means that they have their own values, and I need to be very respectful of those values. Okay. So again, some institutionalized things. Institutionalized racism means that it's built in our system. So we have, schools or prisons or things that are built in our system as institutionalized racism. I mean, if you hadn't had me before, I'll remind you that there are only 3, sometimes 4 races. So there's black, white, black, white, Asian. Everyone else fits somewhere on that continuum. So if we look at our Hispanic population, then you may be black and Hispanic. You can live in, Dominican Republic. You can be white and Hispanic. You can live in Spain, live in any of the countries that are usually north of the border. And then if you look at their Central America type people, Guatemala, Peru, things in there, many times they are Asian descent. So you'll see kind of they're maybe a little shorter, kind of some smaller eyes, things that are very much that look like a typical Asian. But there are only 3 races. So racism is based on my skin color. Okay. Discrimination is illegal. So you can discriminate against me because I'm lesbian, gay, bisexual, color, woman, all those things. Illegal. Prejudice are my thoughts. Okay, so I'm allowed to have my thoughts. We don't police thoughts. However, we do police actions. So if you do something that is overtly discriminatory, then that is against the law. Okay. Communication in general. My daughter-in-law is she's Swiss German, and one of the things that many of the Europeans say is Americans talk too much. So there are many cultures that you speak when necessary. There's no need for us to do all that talking. So understand that if you have a client who is not like you, that they just may speak less. And many times in our Latin and Latin and African American countries, many times we're much more boisterous. We're loud. We talk with our hands. A lot of cultures do that. Just be aware. Again, not good, not bad. Just is. Okay. Just some things that are unacceptable practices that happen in other countries. So if you'll see those questions, they'll purposely say, an Asian family has agreed to, or a family that is of Asian descent has decided that they're going to, beat their child, or they're going to do something that's against American norms or American laws. Remember, safety first. I'm sorry that's within their culture. I'm going to educate them, but I definitely have to remember safety first. So things that might be cultural norms in other countries, child labor, honor killing. So honor killing is definitely to save your family's face, to save face. So should someone, many times of our Muslim families, that if a woman does something, so it's to honor our family, then it would be acceptable to kill her. Not okay, because it's still against the United States, the laws here. Slavery and infanticide, female circumcision, clitorectomies. You'll see those many times in our African countries. They really will. It's almost like a circumcision of the clitoris when girls are about 12 or 13. Many times very unhealthy, not necessarily the most sanitary means. So we'll make sure that, again, that is because it's a cultural thing. It's still illegal in the United States. We're not doing that. Bigamy, child marriage, all those good things. And again, about language, when you're using an interpreter, and I've seen this question, where does the interpreter sit? The interpreter is going to sit beside me. I am talking to the client, so the interpreter sits beside me. Okay, I'm not talking, so she's repeating what I say or sign language, but next to me, and I'm looking at the client. Be sure that you remember it's the client you're looking at. Is it okay to use children as interpreters?
Yes.
No.
No, it is not. It is not. We do it all the time, but for the test, it is not. It's not okay in the real world, but it is not. And especially in my Hispanic families where we have that machismo and dad's the dad, it's humiliating to have my child translate. So, I know many of our agencies don't do, but there are definitely hotlines. There's a hotline where, you call in and you have them translate, and many of agencies say they can't afford it. However, it is not okay. Not okay.
So Pam, I have a question. So say you have a Hispanic family with a child and they don't speak English, and you're an English-speaking therapist. What do you do first?
So there are a couple of questions I've seen on that. So there's one question I've seen about whether or not it's ethical that the social worker takes the case, realizing she's not able to communicate with the family. That is unethical. If you know you can't, unethical. So I've seen a question about then what do you do? Who do you bring in? So the question says they don't have any translators. What do you do next? So the ultimate goal is to have a translator who is aware of the vocabulary that we use in therapy and social work. Okay, because we really want to be able to, because some of those words don't translate across languages. So the ultimate goal would be to get an interpreter who is able to translate using the terms that we would use. That's our first choice. The second choice then is to, hire someone who's a translator, and then we can train them to speak the language we go. But to have the kids is not okay. There's also a question I've seen with a woman. You've been seeing this woman for a long time. She's in a very abusive relationship. Her husband did something, and she is very much in tears. And what do you do? So this one, you already have a relationship with her, and the words she's upset. So what's coming out is Spanish, and it's like, what do you do first? When you're in the room with this woman, you just let her emote in Spanish or whatever her native tongue is, and then we'll go back and we'll try to figure out what it meant or what she said. But when emotions are that high, we just have to really recognize those feelings and let her emote. Okay, does that answer that question?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's some things. Color blindness is never acceptable. You cannot say I don't see color. That's always wrong on the test. What that implies is that you're fine as long as you look like me. Universalism is a term sometimes we also say. Universalism is great in the real world for us to kind of take a universal approach, but it's never okay when we're doing individual therapy. We want to be very, very aware of culture and the differences of culture and differences that people bring. I've seen a question about a Hispanic family who is constantly late. Okay. That is not a sign of resistance in most Hispanic families. That's CP time, color people time, black or brown. Many times, time is just different. And if you live outside or you visit outside the United States, you'll realize that's a very much white European thing of being on time. Even if you go to Key West and you order something, they'll get there when they get there. So really just understanding the difference of what that looks like in different cultures and taking it in the context of what it looks like. Okay. This term, cultural encapsulation, what that means is I am looking at the world just from my viewpoint. I always think like a little Tylenol capsule. All I can see is from my viewpoint. So if I'm, a typical, majority class, and I work 2 jobs every day, and it's hard for me to understand why those people want to climb the wall, because in my little world, I can't even see beyond that. Okay, so the goal is to get out of that encapsulation and to see it from somebody else's viewpoint. And certainly, I'm not taking a stand either way on whether we build a wall, don't build a wall, people come. That's certainly not this political arena. But as a mom, imagine what it must take to leave your country and travel on foot for days with your babies. So just, from my empathy viewpoint, it's like I can't imagine that. Life must be really, really bad for me to risk my babies' lives. Language barriers, verbal, nonverbal. We've all seen those questions about if someone who's Asian doesn't make eye contact. Our Native Americans also many times don't make eye contact. That's considered disrespectful and rude, so you wouldn't. In the African American culture, to address especially an older female by her first name would not be okay. In African American families, it's very much a matriarch many times. So Big Mama, if you've seen any Tyler Perry movies, many times runs the household. That's actually based in time of slavery. That's where that comes from. Is back in the day, I'll give you some hints since the end of Black History Month. But what happened is at the end of the year, the slaves were sold off. In order that you pay taxes on your property. So many times the men were sold off, and the mother had to learn to then become the head of the house. So that is something that's ingrained in African American culture. So it doesn't mean African American women don't like men. It's just that's ingrained in our culture, and it goes way back. You'll see a question about immigration in general, and can immigrants, qualify for social services? The answer is depending on the city. You don't qualify for things like Social Security; those are that federal thing. You don't qualify for food stamps unless your child is born here. But we do have sanctuary cities that do provide assistance that may not come through the federal government level. Okay. So when you're assessing clients and things to consider, what social supports do the clients have, their employability history, things like that. There's a question about a man who has fallen. He's an immigrant and he's fallen off a ladder, and he is unable to get work. He comes to see the social worker, unsure of what to do. And the choices are like refer him for unemployment, refer him for Social Security, all of those things. And the answer is to refer him to an immigration lawyer, because if he's here illegally, then more than likely he will not qualify for most of the things that he would need. But the answer on the test is sometimes, because yes, sometimes there are countries, there are cities that are much more friendly to our immigrant population than others. I'm from South Florida. So in South Florida, there are certainly many opportunities that you wouldn't find now. I live in Tennessee now, where we just don't do that. Okay. Talked about racism in general. Generalized institution, society pattern. We all have biases.
Pam, in your
yes?
example, like say, was this an illegal immigrant?
Yes.
And say he fell off the ladder and got hurt, would he still receive services if he went to the ER?
So the ER is going to treat everybody. So yes, they would treat him, but I don't know. The answer is to patch you up and you go to your regular doctor. So many times he wouldn't have a regular doctor, but yes, he would. The ER does treat. But in general, know that many of our people who are here illegally, the last thing they're going to do is go to the ER. They're very aware that getting a traffic ticket can get them, sent back, get them deported. So they're not. They're trying very, very hard to fly under the radar. Okay, because something simple as that can get you sent back. And I don't know. There's nothing on the test, but there are some of the states do now support the DECA bill, where if you're brought here illegally and when you were a child, then you would be able to, the state would help you go to college. It was not passed at the federal level. So at the state level, there are some states that allow that. In my state, it's not. So you could have been brought here when you were 6 months old. You could have been the top of your class all through college. However, you would not qualify for any of those Pell Grants or Pell Loans because you're not a citizen. Okay. When it comes to when it comes to power, the majority is the power, not necessarily the number of people. So, if we look at South Africa, the majority of the people are brown, they're black, it's like me, but the power is many times in the hands of white South Africans. So when it comes to power, when it comes to majority, those things, majority, we're looking at who controls the power, not necessarily always the numbers. Okay. African Americans are greater risk for involuntary commitment. They're diagnosed with schizophrenia as well as antisocial personalities more than other populations. Gay and lesbians are often treated unethically when it comes to questioning. And I think I sent you last week the terms for those things, so make sure that you know, like gender dysphoria, understanding your sexual assignment, that's what you were born with. And then many people feel they were born with the wrong body parts, so they would choose sexual reassignment surgery. So prior to that, you are a trans, before your surgery, you are transgender. After your surgery, you are transsexual. And that, again, that has nothing to do with your sexual orientation. It just has to do with your gender assignment, your gender roles. That's how you act as a man or a woman. Okay. Again, some other terms. Culture, my culture is defined. I get to define my culture. Okay. So my race is easily defined. You can look at me and you can tell me what my race. But there are a lot of people who look like me, who don't sound like me, who don't eat what I do, who don't live in my area. Okay. So my culture can be defined as my racial, ethnic, religious, or any of those groups. I define my culture. Okay. Your ethnicity, you can have the same social and cultural group. However, my ethnicity is not the same as my race, though sometimes we'll see them interchangeably. Okay. My ethnicity is I'm American. We're all American. We're ethnocentric because we believe that our ethnicity of being American is the best. So that centrism, that circle, that's what that means. Okay. And then the group, the race. Race can be defined as a subgroup that possesses a definite combination of physical qualities of a genetic origin. So remember when you always watch those shows to dig up the dead bodies and there's no skin left, and they'll say it was a petite Asian female. They know that because of the genetic makeup of her bone structure. I mentioned prejudice before. Again, that is not illegal. Those are my thoughts, my values. Discrimination, that is illegal. Stereotyping, that is when all this group must do this. Okay. So, I live in the South. So, when I moved here, people, the joke is, they're all married to their cousins. And if you live in the South, I do apologize because I know that you're only married to half your cousins. No. It's only illegal to marry your first cousin in this state. So you can marry your second, third, whatever. Oppressed minority. Again, so oppression means it's more difficult for me to have the rights that other people do. I talked today, and we talked about the concept of white privilege. If you're not familiar with that, that comes from like Unpacking My Knapsack. That was written a long time ago, but it's a real thing. It is understanding that just based on your skin color, you have privilege that other people don't have. Okay. And now if you can just Google this, Unpacking My Knapsack. But what that looks like, I can go shopping most of the time. Pretty sure that I will not be followed or harassed. I'm sure that my children will give curricular material that testifies to their existence in race. I'm pretty sure if I want to, I'm pretty sure I can find a publisher for this piece on white privilege. I can go to a music shop, hair shop, any of those things and find someone that fits my culture. So if you're not the majority, you're the minority, it's more difficult to find, when I travel, my concern is, will I find someone if I need to do my hair, if I need hair care products, because inside the United States, we still are the minority. On the other hand, when I travel outside the country, especially the Caribbean, then my people look like me. So what I look for, what I need is much easier to find than it is for other people. Okay. Again, all those things. If a traffic cop pulls me over or the IRS audits my tax return, I can ensure that I'm not singled out because of my race. Okay. So again, that is Unpacking My Knapsack, and that's one of the ways of really learning to understand white identity, white privilege. Okay, so just based on being the majority of the people. I gave an example earlier today. So it looks like if I go to buy like nude pantyhose, those aren't nude for me. Okay. Band-Aids. They now have the Band-Aids that match my skin color. So that's what it looks like when it talks about white privilege. Okay. We've got all of those. Ageism. It doesn't matter what age you are, young or old. It still is ageism. If you're too young, too old. Acculturation, matching the culture to culture, matching a culture and still keeping your culture. Your ethnic identity, your social identity. Okay. That's how you identify yourself. Stigma, let's see here. Okay, those are pretty much the terms. And again, I did put that. This is in the yellow book, and it is in the chat box. I really, really like this book. Easy to read. So if you want to follow up with that one, it's just easy read. It's that one, and it is in the chat box. Okay.
How about Muslim population?
I haven't seen questions. Do you want to share?
Yeah, I took an exam where I saw there were 2 questions with I don't remember the specific example, but it was 2 questions where they it was on Muslim.
I mean, I can tell you some things that we actually had an exchange student that lived
And
with us for about a
Christianity
year.
it was too. Something about dogmatic, or is it dog?
In
Uh,
general, our Muslims, um, they read the Quran. So let's see here. The law says that we have to allow Muslims to pray. They pray toward Mecca. Um, let's see what else. I mean, I can give you a whole detail, but I'm trying to think for the question. I know. There's a question regarding men and women and husband and wives. So the rule is women have to cover if they are in public or if they are even at home. If there's a man who would be eligible to marry them, that's when you would have to cover your head. In general, men and women are separate. If you see on TV or if you've ever gone to the mosque, you'll see that the men pray on the floor many times and the women are separately. When it comes to the funeral process, men will dress the men's cloth. Men will dress the men, and women will dress the men. Women will dress the women. So in public, they wouldn't touch. If you had a Muslim client and they were the opposite sex, you would not make an effort to touch or hug them. You don't touch of the opposite sex. You do at home, but not necessarily in public. Um, and while on the outside, the men definitely are in charge, the truth is inside the home, women run the home. See what else? I've not seen any questions on Christianity. Has anybody seen any that you can share? Okay. Just some other things while I'm paging this up. So I asked my Suhaila was her name, and I asked her we talked about, I live in a Christian home, and we asked her what happens if you decide that you're going to, if you're not Muslim and if you want to become a Christian, and then she said, so you can switch, and she lives in a country where, and most countries are really accepting of any religion. We're less accepting in our country, but in most countries, she was Muslim, but very aware of Christmas. Her neighbor celebrated Christmas, so very aware of it. But so she said the rule was if you decided that you were Muslim, and then if you converted to Christianity and you wanted to come back to being a Muslim, they would take you out like in the middle of the ocean. And if you could swim back to where you were, then you could come back as a Christian. But if you didn't make it back, you come back as a Muslim. But if you didn't make it back, then so well. Also, in some things in general, the issue of being on your menstruation is considered very unclean. So women would not be going to mosque when they're menstruating. Many of them don't eat pork. Pork, the Bible talks about being an unclean meat. Almost there. This is social work exam services. This is what Matt talked about. This is, and many times these questions are recycled. You'll see the same questions again on the real test. And one of the concerns is you'll see some of the questions that are similar, and you'll think, oh, I know that. So be sure that you read the question. These also are very much about content, not necessarily about the first and last. So understand, like tonight when I'm teaching about, racial diversity and the importance of those things, I'm really trying to get you to understand content. Those first and last rules don't change, but this is really based on making sure you understand content. Okay? If you will open your chat box or you can share with me, I don't mind. I just don't want to hear my voice the entire time on this video. So cultural competent practice, number 1. When considering a Native American population and developing treatment or service plans, service planners should understand what? Be brave, speak it out, or chat in the chat box. Come on.
Is it 3?
Tell me why.
Oh, I wasn't expecting.
It was just true. Okay, you know that. You know better than that. It's always, I'm asking you why. That is true. That is exactly true. So do you know how many tribes we used to have?
No.
Oh my goodness, there were hundreds of thousands of tribes. Okay, so now we have very few left. Our Native American people are among the poorest in our society. We do know that despite the fact that the Native American properties now can have casinos, everyone thinks they're very wealthy, but it still hasn't changed. It is a sovereign nation, which means that they do not have to follow the rules of the United States. And there's the Indian Welfare Act says that if a child is brought into custody, the first thing we will do is we will make sure that we conduct the tribal leaders.
I don't know if Matt is still on or not, but I feel like I've taken the test, like I said, 3 times. So Native Americans is one that they like to test. So I don't know if he or anyone else has saw this on any of the other exams. Native Americans.
Anybody else want to answer? Matt, are you still there? I don't think he is. Sometimes they're called first people. Have you seen that too?
I don't recall seeing that.
Yeah, sometimes they're called first people. And they're also sometimes they'll consider themselves double-spirited or double-minded, where they consider themselves both men and women, or inside of them they're both men and women. They see themselves as one with the land. And when it comes to treatment, we really want to work within their belief system, especially when it comes to herbs or having the faith healer or whatever works inside their culture. My current students now, there's a powwow every year, and it really is a powwow where the area people come together. The small tribes we have left come together and meet. They're here for a week, and then they do a day to the public where guests can come out and actually meet and talk to some Asian or Native Americans. So it's pretty cool. Okay. Number 2.
Family provider and protector.
You got it. Exactly. So not just the macho guy. He's there for this. Number 3. When an interpreter is needed to conduct a social work interview, the least appropriate person is probably the least appropriate.
A child of the client.
Well, how about 4?
4. Oh, yeah.
Which is the least one, okay?
Yeah.
So, yes, I don't want my child to do it, but I definitely don't want the custodial to come over and do it. That's a violation of HIPAA. That's the least. Okay. Look at number 5. With the same present symptoms, African American clients are more likely to be diagnosed with what?
I can't see number 1. Can you bring it down a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Is that better?
Yeah.
Schizophrenic.
They are. You got it. Bingo. Number 6, a psychological, cultural, and political orientation to life that both determines and influences how we think, behave, make decisions, and understand phenomena is usually called a...
I can't see the question.
Is that better?
Number 6?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Come on, be brave, somebody. You can chat in the chat box. That is perception. Okay, that's how I see the world. And I think we've heard before, all that matters is my perception. So if your client comes in from this viewpoint, we need to understand their viewpoint, their perception. Good.
And why wouldn't that be worldview?
Because most of us don't have a worldview. So orientation to life that both determines and influences how we think, behave, that's our perception. A worldview would be able to say something about, I can see it from the viewpoint of others. I can understand what others... so like now, like the coronavirus, I mean, what's happening in China is absolutely awful. And most of us are only worried is how it affects us. Mm-hmm. God forbid if Amazon can't deliver my package, and I'm going to be upset.
Gotcha.
But okay. I don't have a worldview of people who can't leave their apartment for months and months and months. Okay. Get number 9.
Can you bring it down a little bit,
I
please?
can. Is
Thank
that
you.
better?
Yes.
The Community Health Service has difficulty attracting undocumented local Latino residents for services they clearly need. Many of them are afraid the staff will report them to Immigration and Naturalization Services, resulting in their deportation. Concerned with rampant communicable diseases, the center has charged the Social Service Department with coming up with a solution that brings patients to the center. The strategy that has the greatest chance of success is.
Miss Ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
I
Hello.
just see. I just see 5, 6, and 7. I don't see number 9.
Your internet's probably not there yet.
Okay, there you go.
There it goes. Yeah. So, and I don't run off Wi-Fi. So if you ever have the chance to plug in, you're going to get better coverage. So, but do you see it now?
Yes, I see it now.
Okay.
Is it 2?
I don't know. Tell me why.
I have to read the question again.
Either way, if it's wrong or right, I'm going to ask you why, right? So don't take it personal. Don't be embarrassed. I'm still going to ask you why.
I would say I agree with number 2 as well.
Why?
Well, they said undocumented Latino residents, because they're undocumented. You want them to feel secure in the fact that if they talk to whoever, that they're not going to be told that they're illegal or whatever, or about their immigration status.
Okay. That is correct. Okay. And that's the goal of many of our clients. They're very much afraid of just being sent back, especially if you don't live in a city where that's not an issue. I'm from South Florida. We had children. I was the director of a teen parent program, and we had a lot of girls who their parents wanted them to have their babies in the United States. So they really were kind of, in another country one day and in our country the next day, and they only had to have was shots and birth certificate. It didn't have to be a U.S. birth certificate, just shots and birth certificate, and we let you in our country. We let you because we wanted you to be educated. So. Look at number 17.
Can you bring it down a bit? Thank you.
I was getting there. See, I'm just old and slow. Which Latino nationalities listed below can speak Spanish as their first language, can work in the United States without a green card, and can enter freely and leave the continental U.S. at all times?
Puerto Rican. One. Yep, Puerto Rican.
Yes. They are Americans. That's one of our territories. Okay. Number 18. Religion that uses saints occasionally practices animal sacrifice and is primarily primarily centered in the Caribbean is
The Santeria.
That is Santeria. Yes. In South Florida, many times there would be chicken blood on the court steps if there was something going on. That is but their belief system. There's also chickens riding around everywhere, so that's just kind of fun. But it's not necessarily a voodoo type belief. It is just very much a belief. A lot of our Haitian population, many times many of our Cuban population, so very much believe in Santeria. Let's see here. There are those disorders that are called the culturally bound syndromes. Have you seen any of those?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Culturally bound syndromes.
I've never heard that before.
Let me show you. So in our DSM, there are culturally bound syndromes, and there's a couple of them. And I've seen usually 1 or 2 on the test. Anybody seen one who's taken the test before?
I have not.
So, excuse me. And you might not just have known what they were. So those are some of the ones that we'll see. Running amok. You find that in Brunei, in Indonesia. Brain fag, I've seen that one. It's brain fatigue. We set with our West African students, and you'll see the question about, he's been studying all day, he's been so many hours in, and he says, "Mom, I got brain fog." And so, what does it mean? And it's not that he's a fag. It's really kind of a term. So it's brain fatigue. DAT. DAT syndrome is when many of our South Asians believe that they're having difficulty with sex, they're impotent or having difficulty achieving orgasm, and they got DAT syndrome. Let's see here. The evil eye. It's a common one. They see they're receiving the evil eye. They'll cause misfortune or injury, while others believe it's a kind of supernatural force.
I saw falling out, blacking out. Is that like when you're like filled with the Holy Spirit?
So not it's not a religious not for the test, not a culturally bound syndrome. Okay. Good question. Oh, good question. The root work, that'd be the roots man. Those are the biggies. But what we see is those. So DAT, I've seen, and then I've seen the brain fag, and this one, a nervous attack. So you might see a question about someone from this country, and this is what they're exhibiting. So it doesn't mean we don't treat it. It just means we recognize it as a culturally bound syndrome. Okay, I'll put those. Despite what your teachers told you not to use Wikipedia, it's really okay for anything that's not real research. Put that in there. Close my windows here and get out of everything. That one. Okay, so then we were on. Has anybody seen those words, emic and etic? Two concepts that address the cultural universality and culture specific. Those words are etic and emic. The way I remember them, and it may not work well for you, but emic is me. So that's how I see the world. I see it from a culturally different viewpoint. Etic is if you only see it from the viewpoint of the majority. So emic and etic. Autoplastic and alloplastic. Auto means that when I see issues, the change should come from the inside. Allo means from the outside. So if I want to change things in my environment, that would be alloplasty. Inside my environment, inside me, would be autoplasty. Okay. Let's look at number 14. Example of a cultural practice that could not be accepted or tolerated by United States law is
I don't know.
participation in weird cultural events. I have been to some very strange weddings. Just saying. Which is what?
3.
3. Arranged child marriage with the child is under the age of 14.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that would not be accepted. However, depending on your state, parents can sign for many at the age of 16. So in my state, you can get married at 15 if your parents give you permission. And that's actually quite common in our Hispanic culture where our girls get married a lot younger. Okay. and you can have any name you want on your birth certificate. Okay. Number 22, the model minority notion is applied to Asian Americans. It is seen as a complement to the strong family value and high levels of commitment to personal achievement in such school and work. It's problematic because
One.
yes, got it. It sets unrealistic expectations. You got it. In general, just some topics, some thoughts about our Asian American, especially our Chinese families. Many times we say they're so much smarter. Um, so school is very different for many of my Asian families than it is for us. So while college is free, it's very much a socialist society. Well, not socialist; it's a government-ruled society. The you have to earn to get into college. You cannot buy your way into college. So students know that from day one. From day one, they're studying hard. They're doing amazing amounts of homework because if they don't get in college, there's no other option. So, and while you getting in college, the government tells you where you would go. So you may live in Beijing, and if there's an opening in the college on the other side of the country, you would go. So it's not a matter of where I want to go. It's a matter of I want to get into college. So that is why that whole viewpoint is so different than it is for us. It is a very paternalistic society. It is your job to take care of your father and your father's family. The father takes care of the father's family. So that's why men are so much, you'd rather have a son than a daughter, because it is that fathers will take care of their children, their families. It's becoming more modern, but some of those things are very much traditional. On your resume, if you are female and you have to put your marital status on there, because you can be the smartest female ever. But if you're single, the assumption is that you might get married one day and not work. Or if you're married, you might get pregnant. And all those things that we wouldn't ask in this country are definitely okay. So just know that there's a reason why we say our Asian students study so hard. Okay, 26. Although many medical professions trained in scientific methods are suspicious of alternative health care, it is apparent that many groups make use of at least some alternative medical practices. Which group described below makes the use of traditional natural alternative forms of health care?
Number 2, Asians.
You got it, but the answer is 3. 1/3 of all Americans. So, alternative medicine has growing acceptance. Recently, many health plans have certified certain forms such as chiropractor and acupuncture for reimbursement, reflecting growing demands for these needs.
Tell me, how is that one not trying to trick you?
Well, then, so let's go back to read the question. Though many medical professions trained in scientific methods are suspicious of alternative health care, it is apparent that many groups make use of at least some alternative practices. Which group describes makes the most use of traditional, natural, or alternative care? I don't know. I do know. Many of our Latinos or Asians would not. We might, if it were like, if Native Americans would be on the list, then yes. But most of our,
I picked 3 also. I had my the thing off, but what for me it says makes the use of most traditional natural alternative. When I thought about Asians because I thought about traditionally they do, but I thought about more that they don't use the mix. And I know that as Americans, we're starting to see the benefits of herbs and changing our diets and things like that.
Mhm.
So that
Sounds
for
good.
me was the reason I chose 3.
So the traditional, natural, and alternative forms. So using all 3 of those.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. What, 27? The adoption of use of Western health and social services by ethnic immigrants can be most facilitated quickly by
Is it 1?
improving the family's ability to understand the underlying scientific basis of modern medicine. Um, would that get our ethnic immigrants? The adoption of use of Western health. The answer is 2.
Okay.
Okay. So we really, it's the availability of bilingual, bicultural staff who can create a climate of acceptance. We all like to go places where everyone looks like us. Okay. I've shared with you, my son and my daughter-in-law, they're on this every 3 months live in a different country. They're living the digital nomadic lifestyle. And my daughter-in-law, they were in Montenegro, which is the Black Sea near Yugoslavia. And they were there, and she had flu-like symptoms. So it was awful. Because we're trying to Google to figure out what's going on, because trying to find a doctor who would and this is the other, like, Yugoslavia area. She speaks German. She speaks Swiss German. My son speaks enough French, enough Spanish, but they couldn't find anyone who could understand what they were saying. So that was the biggest worry, is like, she's sick and she's in this foreign country and no one understands. So the goal is just to have staff, and especially if you're, user friendly. One of the things about being culturally competent is in your area, if to make sure that you cater to the minority population. So the doctor's office, if you live in a area that has a lot of Hispanic or a lot of African Americans, the magazines should reflect the community. The art should reflect the community. Your staff should reflect the community. So that's really important to be considered culture competence if we want people to feel welcome. Okay. And we talked about this a little bit before. 28, my culturally bound syndromes. And I don't know if you would know that. The answer is 2. Ethnic, national, locality, specific patterns of aberrant behavior and distress based on your culture. Okay, we talked about this one. Amok. I always think of chicken with its head cut off when I think of running amok.
Latinos?
Southeast Asians.
Okay.
Right. My Latino population many times might use the chickens, but that's for Santeria.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. The chickens.
Yeah.
That's where I got it from.
I live in the South right now also, so it's common to see people with chickens in their yard. I don't, yeah. So. Let's see here. So 30, the symptoms presentation of amok includes a period of brooding followed by episode of explosive, violent episode. And the symptoms may share the features of which of these?
Can you bring it down a little bit?
I can, sorry.
Okay.
And that is 3, a brief psychotic disorder. So any of my LCSWs, please tell me the time frame for a brief psychotic disorder.
30 days or less.
Ah, you got it. So 1 week to 1 month. And then if I have it for 1 month, it becomes 1 month to 6 months. It is
Schizophreniform.
bingo. And then after 6 months, it is.
Schizophrenia.
Yes, you get the bell. Yay! Good job. Exactly. Okay, dokie. My somatoform disorders in general, those are the disorders that soma means body. So, somatoform disorder is when I take anything emotional or mental and it comes out as a physical illness. So, like my conversion disorder, that is when there's a traumatic event. My husband left me and I can't walk. So there's a traumatic event happens, and then my mental health, my physical health, my mental health comes out as a physical health problem. So that's a conversion disorder. Along those lines of a conversion disorder, there are primary, secondary, and tertiary gains, which are different than my primary, secondary, and tertiary interventions. My primary, secondary, tertiary gains are what I would get. So the first one is that primary gain, where I might get, we're not really sure why we do this. It's not evident on the outside of why I would pretend or feign a disorder. Okay. So my primary gain is many times inside. You have no idea, why someone's choosing this. Okay. The secondary disorder is when people around me benefit from it. So if I have a malingering, a somatoform disorder, the secondary gain is the doctors will come give me attention. If, suddenly my husband may come back because now I can't walk after he left me, so I'm getting something out of it. That's my secondary gain. My tertiary gain is more than one person would gain from it. So a tertiary gain would be I can't walk because my husband left me. And then it makes the news because I'm so upset and we all get free tickets to Disney. Those are primary, secondary, and tertiary gains, which come from those somatoform disorders. Okay. Freud believed many of those were just unconscious. Okay. So that sick role, that's my primary gain sometimes. Okay. Difference between a factitious and malingering disorder. Come on, be brave.
Malingering is lying to get out of something, and fictitious is can't remember. If you say it, I'm gonna remember it.
There's no goal. Malingering is I'm getting something out of it. Malingering is it's a workman's comp and I'm too sick to go to work. Okay. Fictitious is we're not really sure. We're not really sure why you would choose that. But according to Freud, they're unconscious, so you're not choosing that. It's just things that just happen. Okay. So conversion disorder, a pain disorder, hypochondriasis, body dysphoric disorder, those are all considered somatoform disorders. Okay. So those are that. So remember primary, secondary gain, which is different than primary, secondary, tertiary interventions. Okay. Number 31, the social and psychological characteristic that may make it difficult for members of some Asian culture groups to seek professional services or assistance is the answer is
Resistance from the extended family.
It's losing face. That's a term. Losing face is it really just we can't show ourselves in public. It is awful to lose face. Okay, and not just in China, but in many of my Asian countries, that's what happened with the kid who Virginia Tech. He was failing, So for that to happen in his family, again, that's a reflection of his whole family. So face is the front, what we believe about ourselves, what we believe about our family. And to lose face is, and I don't think we can understand again. So, let's say a member of our family goes to jail. It was a little embarrassing, but we're not like, whoa. Okay. This one I won't go over, but I will tell you that the NABSW, the Association of Black Social Workers, they still oppose cross-racial adoption. Okay, the theory behind that is black children born with black families. Okay, look at 36. The cycle of oppression.
Three.
36 is 3. Good job. Okay. 37. To the culturally competent practitioner, when confronted by a client of an ethnic, racial, or social group unfamiliar to him or her, would
Actively seek knowledge.
You got it. And that is a code of ethic. The code of ethics says that if a client comes to me and I'm not aware, I'm not familiar, it is my job to make sure I'm aware of that. And again, I said the thing I said at the beginning, we are not expected to know everything about every culture. That is just not possible. But it is my job to make sure that I understand. And I might have said before, I had an intern one time who I was in an inner city high school, and she was from Thailand, and she was Seventh-day Adventist. Neither things I knew anything about. So it was my job to really make sure I understood. She had been homeschooled most of her life, so even the school culture of ringing the bells was really foreign to her. But as her supervisor, that was my job, was to make sure that I understood. I mean, she was really good about bringing me literature to help me really understand. And one of the things that I really was able to see of the expectations of her family, that very much collectivist society. Her parents were both doctors, and they were doctors. They had they were licensed in America as well as several other countries. And the expectation was she was going to be a doctor. Her parents were doctors, and she should be a doctor. She didn't quite have the brain matter it took to be a doctor. Just didn't. And not being, she just didn't. She'd already tried UGA, and she'd fell out of their pre-med program. She was getting her master's degree in social work at the time. And her parents did not come to her graduation because she wasn't done. The expectation was now she would go to medical school. So that's just the way it is. So. Okay. Oh, look at number 38. Reparative or conversion therapy is labeled as an unethical practice by the majority mental health provider associations such as the APA, the ACE, the American Psychiatric Association, and as well as the NASW. What was the goal of reparative or conversion psychotherapy?
They wanted to did they do that with people that were gay or lesbian and they wanted to convert
Yes, there are
Okay.
still places that do it. It's unethical, but there are still places that do it. I think I've talked about aversion therapy before. So this is a type of aversion therapy. And what happens is that literally is to shock the gay out of you. They will, usually most often a male, we will then definitely have a male look at a picture of, he's shown pictures of other males. And if his breath, any increased breathing, any kind of attraction happens, then he would be shocked. And it's usually I don't want to see one near me, that's for sure. The goal is you really would be hooked up to the machine and shocked. Let's see a picture. But the goal is that you really were kind of shown videos of a male. And then if you show any reaction to that male, then you're hooked up to machine and it's a shock therapy. Okay. So that's a reparative therapy, as well as a reparative therapy is a aversive therapy because it causes pain. 39, and considering the unique practice of the unique practical needs of an elderly client, the social worker would not make which of the following suggestions to the appointment adjustments. 39, what should we not do?
4.
Bingo. Okay. 40. Since shame and loss are obstacles, since shame and loss of face are obstacles to asking for and accepting help for a number of immigrant groups, a social worker's can best influence a client decision to accept help by what?
Number 1.
You got it. Allowing the client to divulge and evade until there is trust. And we do know that, again, many of our populations are less likely to be trusting. And I think you've probably all seen the question, and I mentioned earlier, if it's an Asian family, they would prefer to see an Asian therapist. If it's a African-American family, they would prefer to see an African-American therapist. So we all like people, and that's an unconscious choice many times. We like people who look like us, who act like us. Okay. I think I talked about this in a little bit. When we're referring a recent legal Latino immigrant client for public service, the referring social worker should what? He's recent legally. He's here legally.
One.
You got it. Same as we would any other client. Okay. 42. A Latino client is brought to a hospital emergency room. The patient alternates between extreme anxiety and rapid, incoherent babbling. He does not respond to the English-speaking staff and often erupts into violent outbursts when staff member offers a mild tranquilizer. He shouts that he is not crazy. A hospital social worker might suspect. It is one. That is one of my culturally bound syndromes. He's having an attack. Okay. That's a culturally bound syndrome. 43. An elderly Chinese woman who is a recent immigrant requires surgery followed by 6 weeks in a rehabilitation facility. She's unwilling to undergo surgery if she cannot return to her family quickly. Her physician fears that the rehabilitation process may not be manageable for the family and refers them to the hospital social service department. The social worker's best strategy for addressing the problem is to what? What do we know about traditional Chinese families?
Two.
Bingo. In China, the retirement age is 55, and it's not an option. You are going to retire. The assumption is the government will take care of you. But again, like I said earlier, you will move in with your family at some point. Okay, and especially the son, if you have a son. So again, that's a family that you might see. The question might be talking about it's a collectivist society. So, if you have an issue with a child and you call home and, everybody shows up to the appointment, don't be surprised. Okay? Because we live together where the whole family is decided by it's everybody. Number 44. A Vietnamese man is hospitalized for surgery in a suburban hospital. The hospital has no experience with ethnic minorities. It is expected he will stay 2 weeks before returning home. He will not eat unfamiliar hospital foods, and the family brings ethnic food to the patient. This is opposed by medical staff members who fear they will be unable to control his nutrition or monitor his functions. The social worker who works with the family is asked to intervene. What is her best choice? Remember, a best question means there's more than one right answer, but what is the best choice?
Number 4.
That is correct. Why?
Because the client's not eating currently, which isn't good. But you're also not allowed to bring in like your own food into hospitals. So this is kind of a team win when you get the nutritionist kind of monitoring what food and diet's going to be provided.
And we really want to work inside someone's their cultural beliefs. That's self-determination at the utmost. We're not trying to change people's belief system. To be culturally competent means we really respect how important it is. Okay. 45. A Nicaraguan immigrant receives a notice to appear at the Office of Immigration and Naturalization Service, INS, terrified. Fearful of government authority because of his experience in Nicaragua, the client reveals to the social worker that he lied on his immigration application. And if the lie is discovered, he might face prosecution or deportation. The social worker's first responsibility is to exactly discuss his concerns and alternatives that he might pursue, such as employing a lawyer. Is he dying? Is he in imminent danger of hurting himself or someone else?
No.
So am I sharing his stuff? No, I am not. I'm not calling INS. It is not my job. My job is to help my client, and as long as he has not hurt himself or anyone else, everything else in that situation is confidential. Reminder of that. So if a client, shares with you a past crime, as long as it didn't involve children and, he's not, it's something that is, no one's in danger, that is information I keep. I don't share that. Okay. Oh, here's that Muslim question. A 12-year-old Muslim girl and her family immigrated from Egypt 2 years ago. The girl reveals to a school social worker that her family is arranging a marriage to a 40-year-old man with a similar culture and religious background. The marriage will take place within 2 weeks at the local mosque. The girl will begin living with her husband immediately after the ceremony. The social worker understands the early arranged marriages are part of the family tradition and are not considered unusual in Egypt. The social worker's primary obligation is to, I can tell you, do nothing is never the answer. Never, 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 never do nothing. You wouldn't be on here if there was nothing you could do.
I would say 3.
Yes. That's still statutory rape in the United States.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. 47. The wife of a Nigerian immigrant tells a community social worker that her husband is part of a group engaged in extensive financial fraud, violence, and robbery. On many occasions, her husband has physically abused her. She is fearful for her own safety and that of her children, and claims that her husband is indifferent to her pleas in the criminal activity. Moreover, she knows of his plans to kidnap the child of a local businessman. The social worker's first step, hint there, in helping the woman is to what? First. Safety first.
Three.
Yes, that is 3. That is 3. If she stays and she's aware of this crime, what happens? Exactly. She sure is. She sure is. There is a caveat in our law that talks about victims of, if you are a victim of a felony, i.e. domestic violence.
Is it VAWA?
I'm sorry?
I'm thinking of VAWA.
Go ahead, share.
Victims of, it has to do with immigration as well, but if you're a victim, kind of like the sex trafficking, if you're a victim and you're willing to not communicate, basically to help with the prosecution, you can be protected.
Exactly, and that's a fast way to grant you citizenship. So most definitely. Okay, guys, good job, good job, good job. Those are cultural competency issues. So again, the videotape will be available in this chat box after we finish. It'll be online probably, I don't know, about 2 or 3 weeks from now. Questions. This or anything else?
I've got an anything else question, Pam. I'm on your Facebook page, or not your Facebook page, but the academic coaching.
Yeah, that's fine.
And
Yep.
I'm looking for the medical chart, like all the meds.
Let me go back and share let me look it up and see.
Awesome.
Am I still sharing? You still see my page?
Yeah. I see a pink Google page.
Yes. You'd never guess it's my favorite color, would
you? Never.
I'm all girl.
Are flamingos your favorite bird?
No, but I am all girl. I love pink. So in addition, there are announcements. I'm from South Florida. What can I say?
Well, that's what I was wondering.
So my announcements are always there. And then I think it was in a discussion board, or I might have put it in a file. If you look at my files, there we go.
Files.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
Medications. Gotcha. Oh,
Okay.
well.
If you go look in the files, there's always stuff in there. So that's kind of there. Okay. But in general, if you, lots of, there's DSM, some DSM questions. I do tutor for both tests. I tutor for several, the LMFT. I do the chemical dependency test. I do the NCE, as well as the NHMCE. So some of the things might not always apply, but I try to make sure that, you know all the questions and what's there. That pretest is NCE, but this one is a social work cheat sheet there. Just talks about those theories. Okay. So feel free to always go on. And if you're not a friend of, if you're not on my page, just send me a friend request and I'll let you in. If you send me a friend request in general, and it's my homepage is Pam Winton Turner, I'll send you I'll accept your friend request on my homepage, and then you can friend me also. I'll send you a link to join this page as well. Okay, some practice tests there. That's there we go. Important clues. That talks about all of those, the acronyms. Again, not a fan. Some people love them. I personally, I just don't have enough room in my head. Okay, but those are things you look for. Why you're there? What's going on? Who's my client? Okay, and those are the first and next, and the best and most. And I have students who do really well by them. But for me, I just can't. And my personalities, I need to understand, not just memorize. That's just my personality. I need to know why. Okay. I think there's more. Okay, dokies. Questions. If you're not following me on YouTube, you can go to my YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and put in academic coaching, if you just search academic coaching, world changers, you'll find I have lots of videos. Okay. So anything out there, feel free to watch. And again, sometimes it'll say, like, this is a community organization. Sometimes it'll say NCE, but if it's an NCE one, because the orientations, the theories apply to both. NCE test has a lot more research than the social work test. But again, anything you want to look at, it's there. No charge. I don't mind if you share. Okay. Other questions? Ask me. I do not mind. I don't think the test I think it's hard. I'm not going to lie. I don't think it's as tricky as we make it out to be. There are just some rules to follow. Okay. Assess, but don't look for the word assess, just assess. And I did share this in the group. This is a really cool book. Just really cool. It's the APGAR, but in a lesser, much lesser, less verbiage than others. So just a really good way to kind of look at some of those things without all of the verbiage. Okay. The stages of group, that's the Tuckman, and also then there's the Boston model. So I do have to go, guys. Can I answer any more questions? As always, it is my pleasure. Let me turn my camera back on so you can see me.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for following me, and thank you for being part of the group. And I do wish you the best of luck. I will be old one day, and I need all of you to get really good jobs to be able to pay and take care of me. Okay. I'm 54. I'm going downhill shortly. So if I haven't told you and you're still with me, I will be out of town the week of March 31st through April 6th. If I haven't mentioned that to you, I will be in Bali, Indonesia. Worst case scenario, if I get quarantined, I'll be in quarantine for 14 days, but I'll bring my laptop so I can still tutor. No worries. I'll see you guys.
Bye.
And thank you for choosing to tutor with me. I appreciate it.